Before we get started on today's episode, don't you think we should let people know, Aaron, about our presence on social media?
I think we should. I mean, we have a good presence there, and thanks to you, some really good stuff on social media.
So, folks, you can find us if you just look for the Wayback Music Machine podcast. You will find us on both Facebook and Instagram. We're not on Twitter yet because I have to be honest, I'm just not a Twitter fan, but look for us on Facebook and Instagram. So shall we start the show?
Let's start.
Maps?
Check.
Snacks?
Double check.
Tunes?
Check.
I'm Tony Stewart.
I'm Aaron Badgley.
And we are cruising the rock and roll highway in our Wayback Music Machine. Are you ready, my friend?
I sure am.
I have the feeling this is going to be the start of a great adventure.
Kind of a magical mystery tour.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
So, Tony, usually we're very big on all the facts and try to talk about every aspect of a story, or at least as many as we can. The story we're going to talk about right now, I want to be very clear with everyone listening, is that we're not mentioning a certain person's name at all. I don't want to talk about him, his actions. It's just not going to be mentioned. Are you cool with that?
Oh, I'm 100% cool with that. I don't think we should give that guy the time of day. No. And, everybody knows what happened on December 8th, 1980. So, if you don't, look it up, but we're not going to mention that part of things. But
no, I don't think I don't believe in giving any kind of credibility or credit or anything. It just doesn't. So I don't want to talk about him at all.
Sounds good to me. And
excellent.
So, do you remember where you were when you heard the news?
So I do. Do you remember where you were?
Well, I remember, because I was 11 years old when it broke.
You gotta stop that.
So my parents came in the room and told me. I was at home.
So I was at work, and I used to work at a gas station, Hilltop, Texaco. And that day, John Lennon had announced his world tour, that he was going to launch the world tour. And I was so excited to hear that he was going to tour with Yoko and the band. I got home from work at 11 o'clock, and a friend called me and said, turn on the news. And I did, and that's when I heard. It was because I used to work till 11 o'clock, so it must have been 11:15, and it was just all over at that point. And I still remember that vividly. And my mother, I have to tell you this very quickly, my mother had bought me Double Fantasy for Christmas.
Oh.
And she brought it out of her closet and said, I think you need this now. I said, yeah, I think I do, Mom. So that was my memory of that whole night. It was an awful night.
It's awful. One of those moments, just like August 16th, 1977.
Yeah.
Hearing the news about Elvis, and then, December 8th, 1980. These are days that for a certain generation of people, just everybody remembers, right? The world stopped all of a sudden. And
yeah.
I also remember just the disbelief that everybody had. What else can you say? It was shock, right? Because John Lennon seemed to be actually on the rebound in terms of his personal and professional life, and he was getting his stuff together, and he was a United States citizen, and what a shock.
Well, I think he was getting his act together, and he produced I love Double Fantasy to this day. I think it's a brilliant album. And everything seemed to be in order. And I remember the first time hearing Starting Over on the radio, and I didn't know it was coming out, and I was driving and I heard it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is classic Lennon,
Mm-hmm.
I think the shock too, Tony, is you just assume people like John Lennon or Elvis are going to be around forever, or Michael Jackson or George Michael. You don't think of a time without them. And it's been, longer without him now than with him, which is even freakier, right?
Yeah, that is you're right, because it's 2021, 41 years. Oh my goodness.
41 years, yeah. Which is just shocking to me. But did you hear to celebrate, speaking of 40 years, but I'm digressing for just a sec. This is also the 50th anniversary of Happy Christmas War is Over. did you hear what Yoko did this weekend?
I did not. What did Yoko do?
So she pressed up 50 copies in Abbey Road, hand-cut, beautiful 12-inch singles, donated them to record stores throughout England that they can auction off for their own charity.
Oh, my goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah, I my wife would not let me go past $26, but right now the bidding's up to about £4,000.
Oh my goodness, I'm not surprised at all. But that's what a gesture that is.
Yeah. So if you could give Andrea a call and say it's okay for me to bid £5,000, you know.
That's right. Just give me your credit card number.
Exactly.
I'll get that record for you. Don't you worry.
But yeah, it was a terrible. And do you remember the on the following Sunday they had the 10 minutes of silence?
I do.
Yeah, at Central Park.
And you know the story broke, of course, on Monday Night Football.
Howard Cosell.
Yep. And I'm a Howard Cosell fan, actually.
Me too.
Just because of his relationship with Muhammad Ali, who's one of my idols. But you can hear on Howard's voice. I mean, he was in disbelief, right?
Yeah. I think it just shocked everybody. I don't think there's been not until 9/11 did anything kind of come close, because it was just so unexpected and so senseless. And so, someone dies of an overdose or whatever is one thing, but to go this way, especially after years of campaigning for peace and it's just, the whole thing is just awful,
Yeah, it certainly is. And Strawberry Fields, that area in Central Park now, I've been there 3, maybe 4 times, but I think I told you that I missed Yoko by about 2 or 3 minutes one time. I know.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Would you have talked to her? Would you have been brave enough to talk to her?
I don't know if I would have or not, because there were quite a few people around, so.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, on December 8th, my daughter, who lives in New York City, decided to go down to Strawberry Fields on December the 8th. And there was about 300 or 400 people there. And some guy had a guitar out and they were singing songs. She ended up staying till about midnight, but she said when the time of the incident happened, everyone just went quiet. And you could see the Dakota. And she said it was very emotional to be there for that. So, and she wasn't around, obviously, when this happened, but it still had an impact on her at the time she was 21,
Well, and just to see someone cut down in the prime of their life, right? Because we're both well past 40 now, and
well past 50 for me.
I'm getting there too, my friend. But we, John had big plans, and he was just coming back from the studio that night, and totally senseless.
Yeah. So we kind of dedicate this show, I think, to John and his memory, and it's sad because we just talked about losing George a couple of episodes ago, and it's I don't like to dwell on the loss, but you have to acknowledge it, because it's major, right?
Well, and you know what? I think for as long as we're doing this show, I mean, we'll be talking about this every December 8th. We'll find a new angle for it next year, but it's the one story that just dominates this week in rock and roll history.
Well, it has to, and it's and let me ask you a question. I know you're younger than me, folks. They're better looking, but you were 11 years old. Do you remember the Double Fantasy album when it came out, or were you not really into it?
Well, I remember seeing it when it came out, but I wasn't really buying many albums at that point yet. So, but I was aware. I was aware that he had come out with an album. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to put some of the songs of his on our Spotify playlist, and I encourage people who are listening. It'll be a good playlist to kind of just get a good sense of who Lennon and the Beatles, because this episode, we're kind of focusing on we're doing something different this week, aren't we, Tony?
Well, that's right. We're doing all Beatles. So all 3 segments are Beatles. And the week of December 8th here is a really interesting chart, actually. So do you want to go over that?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, too. And what I did was I usually do top 5 singles, but I decided to do the top 6, and you'll know why.
Yeah.
Number 6 was John Lennon, Starting Over, and it was number 8 the previous week, and it was on its way to number 1. Back then, Tony, because the charts were based on radio play and record sales, records didn't just go in at number 1 like they do now. They used to climb up the charts slowly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So John was climbing up the charts slowly but surely. Number 5 was a great song called Master Blaster by Stevie Wonder. I don't hear that ever anymore. Do you know that?
You know what? I don't either. The only time I ever hear that is when I'm watching Stevie's live shows. But
yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Number 4 is a song my wife loves. I've got to tell you, I'm not a fan of. Barbra Streisand, Woman in Love with Barry Gibb.
I'm going to side with you on this one. I'm not a fan of that either. So
I guess for sure I'm not going to be bidding on that record now. Queen was at number 3 with Another One Bites the Dust. Leo Sayer, More Than I Can Say. Whoa, whoa. And number 1, Kenny Rogers with Lady. Remember that?
I do remember that. Now, did you know that Kenny Rogers plays stand-up bass, and he can play jazz bass? Like, he is totally competent. And I did not say incompetent, folks. I said totally competent. He is was a terrific stand-up bass player. I did not know that until just a few years ago, but there is footage of him playing.
I tell you, it doesn't overly surprise me. Do you remember his band? Well, you probably don't, because you're, as we all know, younger. But he had a band in the 60s called the First Edition. And they did some mighty fine records, man. They really good stuff. Like, just came in to see what condition my condition was in. Love that. And of course, Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town. But I'd love to see, are there clips on YouTube of him playing stand-up?
There are. So I'll send you some.
Yeah, I got to see that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And I had no idea, like I said, so it gives me a new appreciation for that guy.
Hey, why not, right? Because, I don't hate Kenny Rogers at all. But, wasn't a big fan of Lady, but,
Yeah, there you go. Now, should we move on to our next Beatles segment? What do you think if we went to December the 6th, 1961?
And we're going to go to Liverpool, right?
Yeah, we're going to go to Liverpool, and this is an iconic Beatles moment. So should we Let's check it out. Okay.
Let's check it out.
So here we are in Liverpool, one of our favorite cities, and it's December the 6th, 1961. And this is a fantastic Beatles moment, because this is when John, Paul, George, and Pete Best, before Pete left the band, met with Brian Epstein, and they were having further discussions about his proposal to manage them. So Epstein's proposal was that he wanted 25% of their gross fees each week, and his promise was that they would never again play for less than £15, which is a nice sum back in those days, except for the Cavern lunchtime sessions, and he said that he would double their fee and get £10 each. And of course, Lennon, who was the leader at that time of the group, accepted. So that's a huge, huge moment in Beatles history, because I think without Epstein, maybe none of this would have happened, right?
Well, and also Brian Epstein never signed the contract. And he didn't sign it because he wanted to have an out for the Beatles. He was that honorable to say, look, I won't sign this. And that way, if I don't keep my word, you guys are out of the contract. Which is, you wouldn't hear that these days, would you?
No, and in fact, I imagine that was pretty rare those days as well.
Well, yeah, when you read Colonel Tom Parker, for example. But you said something earlier on, which I thought you were being very generous when Pete Best left the band. you were being ever so kind.
Well, yes, and that story, of course, they were just desperately trying to get a record deal, and it was felt that Pete just wasn't a good fit for the band, and they approached Rory Storm and the Hurricanes and said, "We want your drummer, we want Ringo." And Ringo took a chance, and there's the missing piece, right?
Now, there is, and there's a famous picture of the Beatles just after Ringo joined, and I think they just signed to EMI, and it was a publicity photo, and George has a black eye, which he got because of a fight defending Pete. Like, people were like angry in Liverpool that they got rid of Pete Best. Angry. So they got this massive brawl in Harrison. Have you seen that photo?
I have not seen that photo. No, that's
classic. Classic.
You know what? Let's send me that photo and we'll share it in the social media posts this week.
I will send. Yeah. It's hilarious. And just so everyone knows, I have nothing against Pete Best. In fact, I have a complete Pete Best solo record collection.
Oh, there you go. You know what? I've got nothing against Pete Best either, but there are times when those kind of decisions have to be made, and obviously it was the right decision when you look at what Ringo brought to the group, right?
Well, it was I forget what show it was. Paul McCartney was talking about having Ringo drum for them, and he said he turned around and went, "Yep, now we're complete." Like they just knew, right? So.
Well, and the other thing was that Ringo really was the only one at that time that could have been considered a true professional gigging musician as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think.
Well, that's a good point.
Because he was on a salary with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. And so he was taking a chance with these boys, you know, and it sure worked out well, as we know.
And do you know the one condition the Beatles had for Ringo to join the Beatles?
I'm not sure.
Shave off his beard.
Oh, my goodness. Makes sense, though. Yeah.
He had a beard. He was like a hipster. They said, no, sorry, you got to shave the beard off. You can't be a Beatle with a beard.
Oh, there you go.
10 years later, they all had beards, but yeah, at that time, no, sorry.
That's a great fact.
Well, you know. So yeah, this was a monumental day, and I have to agree with you. I think that the other missing piece besides Ringo was Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think he really believed in the band, and he got them to where they were, to where they got.
Oh, absolutely.
Their talent as well, obviously, but you know.
Yeah, but now I wonder, you know, let's just play the what if game for a second here. If Epstein, I'm not sure if we're pronouncing
Epstein.
I have always said Epstein as well, but if Epstein hadn't approached them, do you think the band would have broken up? I mean, they were getting pretty frustrated.
Wow, I've never thought of that question. I think so. I think they would have eventually packed it in, because if they weren't getting anywhere, they were probably getting frustrated. And I think that's a really good question, Tony. What do you think?
I think they would have broken up. I mean, I can see them moving on to other projects with other people, perhaps. But I know they were awfully close a few times to just saying, you know what, we need day jobs here. And
well, certainly when they came back from Hamburg, when George was sent back and Paul and Pete got arrested, at that point, they were very close to breaking up. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think they would have drifted. I think they would have always done music, but I think it would have been under different circumstances.
Now, what did you pick for the charts this week? Because 61 would have been a really interesting chart. Some rock and roll on there for sure, but also, I'm sure, some show music or something. Well,
I thought I'd go and do the UK top 5. And I'll tell you why I did that, Tony, because you may or may not remember that Brian Epstein his parents owned a store, and he was given the record department to manage. And he was one of the people that they used to poll to compile the charts in England. So in 1961, he was a pretty major player for the northern part of England in terms of record stores. So here we go, top 5. Adam Faith, The Time Has Come. Adam Faith never really made it over here, but he had a great voice, very powerful, and he had a career well into the 80s in England, but not over here. Number 4, Frankie Vaughan, Tower of Strength. Number 3, one of the songs the Beatles used to cover at the Cavern, Bobby V's Take Good Care of My Baby.
Oh, great song.
It is. And you know how Bobby V got his start, right?
No.
He filled in for Buddy Holly after the plane crash with the Crickets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how he got his start. Terrible way to start, but... And number 1, I don't know if you like this guy or not. I'm pretty sure you don't. A guy named Elvis Presley. with a double A side, his latest Flame and Little Sister.
And, we were remarking actually last night when we were chatting, because we actually chat, as people know, we chat every day.
Yeah, we do.
And there's a cool coincidence in these charts. So, folks, just pay attention to the charts that Aaron is announcing, especially the number ones, because there's a really, really interesting, weird kind of spooky connection that we're going to make. But Elvis Presley was number one, and so keep that in mind, folks. Now, what do you say? We're going to stay on December 6th, but we're going to head to 1966, and I think we're going to talk some pirate radio. So we're going to put on some little commercials from the pirate radio era. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Radio Caroline.
So in England, they only had the BBC for radio, Tony, as you know. So some very enterprising young people started doing pirate stations, which they would broadcast literally on ships anchored off the British coastline, but with further on the distance of the boundaries, so they weren't part of England. And these are called pirate radio stations. And the two most famous were Radio Caroline, which is still going today, folks, and Radio London. And at this date, in 1966, the Beatles did something kind of cool, didn't they, Tony?
Well, they absolutely did. And the whole history of pirate radio, I find that fascinating, the way that
me too.
That they were able to skirt the BBC monopoly a little bit. And they, before I give away the cool thing that the Beatles did, but pirate radio had a lot of listeners. They had a really big listenership. And these DJs, they would come to the ship on a boat from the shore. The DJ would arrive by a little boat and do their set, and they were treated like celebrities, these guys.
Because they were.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were absolutely... Hey, Tony, did you see where Radio Caroline got its name?
Let me just take a look here and let's see, because I think you mentioned that. Oh, it was named after Caroline Kennedy.
Pretty cool, eh?
That is very, very cool. But yeah, these guys were celebrities, and pirate radio certainly took a big bite out of the BBC. And so the BBC was not happy about that. But the Beatles, they decided, and this is very cool, they decided to record some Christmas and New Year's greetings for those very same pirate radio stations, Radio Caroline and Radio London. And so the Beatles fully understood the role that these pirate stations were playing, because, it was very, very tough with the way the BBC was so controlling over the airwaves.
Well, and it's interesting that in 1966, the same year, that summer, when the Beatles toured the U.S., this was during the More Popular Than Jesus comment and all that kind of stuff, they let journalists from the pirate stations accompany them, not from the BBC. Kenny Everett, who's a brilliant comedian from Liverpool, from Radio London, and Radio Caroline's Jerry Layton. They both accompanied the Beatles on the tour, and it was a major thing to have these guys with them. But funnily enough, the UK Post Office, the country's monopoly telephone service provider, had cut ship-to-shore communication. So Kenny Everett had to call a number on the landline, and they would bring the stuff over to the ship.
Yeah, it's incredible. And eventually, of course, most of these pirate radio stations were forced to close down through legislation, because they were going to face massive, massive fines. But some of them held on a little while afterwards. But most of them, when it was the date, they went till 11:59, and then they signed off. And that must have been bittersweet.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a sad story, right? But it's like anything else, Tony. It's just it was necessary at the time, don't you think? Like, because it had to compete with the BBC.
Well, absolutely. Now, you just reminded me of one of my favorite stories. Do you remember when we covered that story of the guy who put up the antenna on his own and and was playing the, I can't remember what episode that's from now, but he made his own radio station basically because he said everything that they're playing now is terrible. So he was playing classic rock hits.
Didn't he do that in the backyard or something?
Yes, he put up a tower in his backyard, which is just a fantastic story.
I love that story. It still makes me laugh every time I think about it because I just thought I want him as a neighbor.
Well, that's right. But the pirate radio station era was fascinating. I encourage anybody who's interested in that to, watch some documentaries or do some reading about it. There are also some great podcasts about that. It is so fascinating.
That's actually a movie too.
Oh, that's right. It was called Pirate Radio, right?
I think it was. It was called Pirate Radio.
Good movie.
So,
I remember that.
Yeah, not a bad film. So there's a few choices there to go to. Yep.
Well, that's right. So what did you pick, Aaron, for the charts this week?
Well, I stayed in the UK. I thought, why not? Because we're talking about UK. And I thought this is where the weirdness starts, folks.
Yeah.
Number 5 was Manfred Mann with a song called Semi-Detached Suburban Mr. James.
What a great title.
Isn't that a great title? I love that title. Number 4 is Val Doonican, Fine Irishman, with What Would I Be? Number 3, Spencer Davis Group with a very, and I mean very young Stevie Winwood with Give Me Some Lovin'.
He was just a teenager at that time.
I think he was 15, wasn't he?
I think so, yep.
14, 15? Really young. My favorite Beach Boys song of all time at number 2, Good Vibrations. And number 1, Tom Jones, Green, Green Grass of Home.
And we've been telling you, folks, pay attention to the number ones. So we had Elvis the last time and Tom Jones here. And we're going to not introduce because it's 3 episodes old now, but we have a segment called From Memphis to Merseyside. And we're going to talk about the connection between these two guys and the Beatles. So are you ready to hop back to the present?
I'm always ready, but can we I wouldn't mind some fish and chips now.
You know what? Me too. We should do that every time we come over to England. So
I think so. I think so. Yes.
All right. Let's go back to the future. So here we are back in the present. But before we do the From Memphis to Merseyside moment, we got a quote on social media from one of our fans and a good friend of ours, Bernard Fraser. Yeah. And I love this quote, so I'm going to be using this a lot. Here's what Bernard said. He said, "If you've missed an episode, the link takes you to their home base where you can check out all past 33 shows. It's kind of a 33-episode rock and roll history lesson with the teachers you wished you'd had in high school." That's fantastic. So Bernard, thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks, Bernard. That's great.
And I guess he's getting our fan shout out today then. So
he is. He
is.
And his very talented group, Church of Trees, will be putting a new album out in the new year.
And I have a sneaking suspicion that you and I are going to be involved in that.
I think maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So stay tuned, folks. So let's talk about the Memphis to Merseyside moment. So last night I pointed this out to you and you were like, yeah, you're right. It is a weird coincidence.
I swear I didn't do it intentionally. I did not.
Yeah, it's a neat connection. So this, we figured, must have been January 1970. So it is not this week in rock and roll history, but it's kind of, within the month.
Close enough.
Close enough, that's right. Tom Jones and Elvis Presley were both, they had residencies in Las Vegas at that time. And Elvis and Tom, were chewing the fat when they were both finished their shows. And Elvis said to Tom, I heard the Beatles broke up. I just heard the news and they were chatting about that. And Elvis had said he didn't know why they were breaking up, but that it was huge news. But it was what he said to Tom after that, which was, why don't you tell everyone what he said?
Well, the huge news was that he was hoping that the Fab Four would become their backup band and do a show together. No Beatles songs, they would just do Elvis and Tom Jones. Oh my gosh, Tom Jones tunes. And I love Elvis, but Elvis, what are you thinking, buddy?
Yeah, and now, Tom, I listened to the interview where Tom Jones said that. And,
did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Cool.
I'll send it to you. He was saying, though, that Elvis was laughing the whole time he said that, so I don't think he was serious. But there's the connection, folks, right? Number one in 61 was Elvis, and in 66, number one was Tom Jones, and we're doing a Beatles episode, so that's a very cool coincidence.
I honestly, Tony, I would love to say I planned that out, but I didn't. It was just, it all kind of came together,
Yeah, absolutely. So there was another very weird moment in Tom Jones's interview. So he was talking about Eric Clapton, of course, who's got a Beatles connection from his work on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. But he was saying that Tom Jones had been chatting with Clapton and wanted Clapton to be his guitar player. And Clapton had said, well, if this Cream thing doesn't work out, then then I'm there. I'm your guy. So if Cream had flopped, Clapton would have been playing guitar for Tom Jones. How about that?
Can you picture old Slowhand playing Green Green Grass at home? I can't. I just can't.
No, but go figure, eh? It was a fabulous interview. Yeah, I'll send you the link for that.
Yeah, please do. I'd like to. But it's all about the what ifs, eh? Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Just crazy.
And we're coming to the end here, but what I'm happiest about, Aaron, with today's show is that we managed to put what I think is a pretty positive and fairly lighthearted spin on a tragic event.
Yeah, that's important to both of us.
Yep, and when we do this week next year again, and we're talking about John, we'll do the same thing, because I do enjoy taking a lighthearted look at the week that was, because rock and roll was never really designed to be all that serious in the first place, right?
Damn straight. Damn straight.
So, folks, thank you very much for allowing us into your headphones, and rock on, as they say, and we will see you again soon. And Aaron, we're pulling up to your place here, so have a great week, my friend.
I will, and I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds great. See you soon. Music for today's episode of the Wayback Music Machine podcast was written by Rick Denis. The show notes, chart selection, and Spotify playlist were created by Aaron Badgley.
And the artwork, recording, editing, and sound production was done by Tony Stewart. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to tell a friend or two. And don't forget to click follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player to get the latest episodes automatically.
And we'd love it if you would leave us a review. You can also engage with the show by going on our website and leaving us a voicemail. We may even play your voicemail on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for taking this road trip with us, and we'll see you next time on the Wayback Music Machine podcast.
Hey, turn the radio up. I love this song. The Wayback Music Machine podcast is a Stewie Tunes production.